The rusty boat engine coughed to silence as Sarah Chen stared at the lush green island rising from crystal blue waters. 3 months ago, she'd been living in her car with 8-year-old twins Maya and Alex, rationing crackers and praying for miracles. Then came the stranger's impossible offer. A private island, no questions asked, just sign the papers. Now, watching her children laugh as they splashed in the shallows for the first time in years, Sarah felt the familiar knot in her stomach. Nothing in life came free. She knew that better than most. 10 years as a forensic archaeologist had taught her that every discovery came with a price. The island seemed perfect, too perfect. The fresh water spring, the fruit trees, the small cabin waiting as if someone knew they were coming. But as Maya's excited voice called out from the treeline, Sarah's blood turned cold. Her daughter stood frozen, pointing at massive stone carvings that definitely weren't on any geological survey. Ancient symbols that Sarah recognized. Symbols that meant this island wasn't just a sanctuary. It was a secret that powerful people had killed to protect. What had that stranger really given them? And why was her family the perfect cover for something far more dangerous than homelessness? Sarah's legs moved before her mind caught up, splashing through the shallow water toward where Maya stood transfixed. The symbols carved into the weathered stone face were unmistakable, Polynesian, but older than anything she'd encountered in her academic career. Much older. "Mom, what is it?" Alex called, bounding up behind his sister with a handful of shells. His voice died when he saw the massive carved surface emerging from beneath decades of vine growth. "It's beautiful," Maya whispered, reaching toward the stone. "Don't touch it," Sarah said sharply, then softened her tone. "Not yet, sweetheart. Let Mummy look first." The symbols seemed to pulse in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Sarah's trained eye traced the intricate patterns. Spirals within spirals, figures that looked almost human but weren't quite right, and at the center, a symbol she'd only seen once before in a classified government file. Her blood chilled as the memory surfaced. Dr. Marcus Webb, her former colleague at the Smithsonian, had shown her similar markings during their last conversation. 3 days later, he'd died in what authorities called a hiking accident. The file had disappeared from his office before the police arrived. "Kids, we need to go back to the cabin," Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Now." "But, Mom," Alex started. "Now." Something in her tone must have reached them, because both twins fell into step beside her without further protest. Sarah's mind raced as they walked. The stranger who'd approached her in the McDonald's parking lot, tall, well-dressed, with eyes that seemed to catalogue everything, had he known what was here? Of course he had. Nothing about their situation had been coincidental. The cabin sat in a small clearing, quaint and welcoming, with solar panels gleaming on the roof, and a vegetable garden that looked recently tended. Too recently. Sarah had assumed the mysterious benefactor had prepared it for their arrival, but now she wondered who else might know about this place. "Can we explore more after lunch?" Maya asked as they climbed the porch steps. "We'll see." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she turned the key they'd been given. Inside, the cabin was exactly as promised, clean, stocked with food, and equipped with basic necessities. A tablet sat on the kitchen counter with a note, "For emergencies only." GPS coordinates are programmed. Sarah picked up the device, noting it had no internet connection but contained detailed maps of the island. Her breath caught. According to the topographical data, the stone structure Maya had found was just the tip of something much larger, an entire complex buried beneath the jungle floor. She set the tablet down carefully and began preparing sandwiches with hands that wanted to shake. 20 years of careful planning, of building a career, of creating stability, all destroyed when the university accused her of falsifying research data. The accusation had been baseless, but by the time her name was cleared, her reputation was ruined. No one would hire a forensic archaeologist with a cloud of scandal hanging over them. The descent into poverty had been swift and merciless. Eviction, job rejections, watching her children's eyes lose their spark as they slept in the back seat of their Honda Civic. When the stranger had approached her with his offer, Sarah had been 2 days away from surrendering the twins to child services. "Are you okay, Mom?" Alex's voice broke through her spiral of memories. Sarah looked at her son, really looked at him. Color had returned to his cheeks after just a few hours on the island. Both children seemed lighter somehow, as if the weight of their circumstances had already begun to lift. "I'm fine, baby." She handed him a sandwich. "Just thinking." But as Maya chattered excitedly about the treasure cave they'd discovered, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone on this island. Someone was watching. Someone who'd been waiting for an archaeologist desperate enough to ask no questions. The question was, had they just found salvation or walked into a trap? The helicopter's rotor slowed to a whisper as Elena stepped onto the landing pad, her legs unsteady after the 3-hour flight. The Pacific wind whipped her dark hair across her face as she surveyed their new home for the first time. Kailani Island stretched before them like an emerald jewel set against endless blue. Dense jungle crowned volcanic peaks that disappeared into wisps of cloud, while pristine beaches curved around hidden coves. It was breathtaking and completely isolated. "Mom, look!" 12-year-old Maya bounced on her toes, pointing to a waterfall cascading down distant cliffs. "Can we explore today?" "After we get settled," Elena replied, though her daughter's excitement was infectious. For the first time in months, Maya looked like a normal child instead of a patient. 16-year-old Alex emerged from the helicopter more cautiously, his artist's eye taking in every detail. "It's like something from a movie," he murmured, already reaching for his sketchbook. Dr. Chen, their medical supervisor for the island stay, approached with a warm smile. "Welcome to Kailani. Mr. Blackwood sends his regrets that he couldn't greet you personally. Urgent business in Singapore." Elena nodded, though she'd been hoping to finally meet their benefactor face to face. Everything about their arrangement felt surreal. One moment she'd been drowning in medical bills and desperation, the next a lawyer was presenting Blackwood's offer. 6 months on his private island, all expenses paid, with access to experimental treatments for Maya's condition. "The house is just through those trees," Dr. Chen continued, leading them down a stone path, fully equipped, solar-powered, with satellite internet for Alex's schooling. The house materialized like something from a dream, a stunning blend of modern architecture and tropical design, all glass walls and soaring timber beams. Inside, the space was open and airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic ocean views. Maya immediately claimed the bedroom with the best view of the waterfall, while Alex gravitated toward the art studio Blackwood had somehow known to include. Elena found herself alone on the main deck, watching the helicopter disappear into the distance. Having second thoughts, Dr. Chen joined her at the railing. "It's just, why us? Mr. Blackwood doesn't know our family. Maya's condition isn't particularly rare or interesting from a research standpoint." "What does he get out of this?" Dr. Chen's expression remained carefully neutral. "Perhaps some people simply want to help." That evening, after Dr. Chen had returned to his own quarters on the far side of the island, Elena sat with her children as they planned their adventures. Maya's color was already better, whether from the clean air or pure excitement. Alex had filled 3 pages with sketches, his creativity sparked by their exotic surroundings. "Can we swim tomorrow?" Maya asked, pressing her face against the window. "We'll see how you're feeling," Elena replied automatically, then caught herself. When had she become the mother who said no to everything? Actually, yes, if the weather's good, we'll explore the beach. Maya's delighted squeal made Alex grin, a rare sight these days. Later, after the children were asleep, Elena wandered the house. Everything was perfect, almost unnaturally so. The refrigerator was stocked with their favorite foods. The medicine cabinet contained Maya's prescriptions, properly refrigerated. Even the books on the shelves matched their interests exactly. How had Blackwood known so much about them? She stepped outside, drawn by the sound of waves and the star-drunk sky. The jungle rustled with unfamiliar sounds, not threatening but alien. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she noticed something odd about the trees nearest the house. They grew in perfectly straight lines, too geometric to be natural. Following the pattern, she walked deeper into the shadows until she found them. Stone pillars, ancient and weathered, carved with symbols that seemed to shift in the moonlight. They were arranged in a precise circle, clearly man-made but impossibly old. Her phone buzzed with a text message, "Beautiful night for exploring, but be careful where you wander. Some places on the island are dangerous after dark. J. Blackwood." Elena's blood chilled. She spun around, searching the darkness, but saw nothing. How had he known she was out here? Was he watching them? Another message appeared. "Don't worry, you're perfectly safe. The island simply has a long history. We'll talk soon." Elena hurried back to the house, her earlier peace shattered. As she locked the door behind her, she caught a glimpse of movement in the jungle, a flash of white fabric between the trees, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. But the feeling of being watched lingered, even as she checked the children and finally tried to sleep. Outside her window, the ancient stones seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, keeping time with her racing heart. Paradise, she was beginning to realize, might come with a price she hadn't anticipated. The morning came with an eerie stillness that made Elena's skin crawl. She stood at the kitchen window, watching mist roll across the island's interior like ghostly fingers reaching toward the shore. Marcus had left before dawn for another inspection of the facilities, his departures becoming increasingly frequent and unexplained. "Mom, look what I found!" Sophie burst through the back door, her arms cradling something wrapped in her beach towel. Behind her, Jake followed with uncharacteristic excitement, lighting his usually sullen features. Elena turned from the window, grateful for the distraction from her mounting unease. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sophie carefully unwrapped her treasure, revealing an intricately carved stone disc about the size of a dinner plate. The surface was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the morning light, creating an optical illusion that made Elena dizzy if she stared too long. "We found it in that cave system near the North Beach," Jake explained, his voice carrying a reverence she'd never heard before. "There's a whole chamber down there, Mom. The walls are covered in these symbols." Elena reached out tentatively, then jerked her hand back as the stones seemed to pulse with warmth. "Where exactly did you find this? I thought we agreed you'd stay close to the house." "It's not that far," Sophie protested, "and we were careful. Besides, there's something else. The symbols, I think I can read some of them." "That's impossible, honey. These look ancient, maybe thousands of years old." But even as Elena spoke, she felt a strange recognition stirring in the back of her mind. The flowing lines and geometric patterns triggered something deep in her consciousness, like a half-remembered dream. Jake pulled out his phone, showing her photos of the cave walls. "Look at this one, Mom. Sophie says it's about protection, about keeping something safe." Elena studied the image, and her breath caught. The central symbol was unmistakable, a spiral surrounded by interlocking circles, identical to a pendant her grandmother had worn. A pendant that had supposedly been in their family for generations, passed down through the women who carried what her grandmother had cryptically called the old knowledge. "We need to put this back," Elena said suddenly, a chill running down her spine. "Right now. But, Mom, no arguments. Some things aren't meant to be disturbed." Sophie's face fell, but something in Elena's tone must have conveyed the seriousness because both children nodded reluctantly. As they rewrapped the disc, Elena caught sight of movement through the window. A figure was approaching through the mist, tall, imposing, definitely not Marcus. "Stay here," she instructed the children, stepping onto the porch. The man emerged from the fog like something from another era. His skin was weathered and dark, his long hair streaked with silver, and he wore simple clothes that seemed perfectly suited to the island's wild landscape. But it was his eyes that stopped Elena cold, ancient, knowing, and filled with a sadness that spoke of centuries. "You found it," he said simply, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place. The first key. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Who are you? This is supposed to be a private island. Private? The man's laugh held no humor. This land has never belonged to any one person. We are its guardians, as our ancestors were before us. As yours were, Elena Moreau. The use of her full name, her maiden name, sent ice through her veins. How do you know that name? Your grandmother spoke of you before she died. Celeste Moreau, last of the bloodline, keeper of the old ways. She said one day you would return to claim your inheritance. Elena's knees nearly buckled. Her grandmother had died when she was 12, and they'd never spoken of any inheritance beyond her pendant, which Elena had lost years ago during her divorce proceedings. That's impossible. My grandmother was from Louisiana Bayou country. She never mentioned any island. The knowledge runs deeper than geography, the man said, stepping closer. The symbols your daughter reads so easily, they're not learned, they're remembered. The blood remembers what the mind forgets. Behind her, Elena heard the soft gasp of recognition from Sophie. She turned to see her daughter staring at the stranger with wide, knowing eyes. You're one of them, Sophie whispered, one of the guardians. The disc showed us why we're really here. The man nodded solemnly. The island called you home, child. But you must understand, Mr. Thorne's intentions are not as benevolent as he claims. He seeks to unlock power that has been safely contained for generations. Your arrival was not coincidence. You are the key he's been searching for. Elena felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Everything, the generous offer, the perfect timing, the mysterious benefactor, had been orchestrated. But for what purpose? What does he want? She managed to ask. The guardian's expression grew grave. To wake what should sleep, and once awakened, there may be no way to put it back. The morning sun cast long shadows across the beach as Sarah knelt beside the weathered stone tablet they'd uncovered the day before. The symbols seemed to shimmer in the early light, almost as if they were alive. Marcus had been working through the night, cross-referencing the markings with images from his research databases, and his excitement was palpable. Look at this, he said, pointing to a sequence of interconnected spirals. These aren't just decorative. They're a map of some kind, showing underground passages that run beneath the entire island. Emma sat cross-legged nearby, sketching the symbols with remarkable precision for a 10-year-old. Her artistic eye had caught details that even Marcus had missed, subtle variations in the carving depth that suggested different time periods of creation. Mom, some of these are newer than others, Emma said, not looking up from her drawing. See how these lines are sharper? Like someone came back and added to the original design. Sarah felt a chill despite the warm morning air. Added what? And when? Before Marcus could respond, Jake came running up from the shoreline, his face flushed with excitement and something else, concern. There's a boat coming, a big one. Sarah's stomach dropped. They'd been on the island for 3 days without any contact from the outside world. The communication device Thorne had given her remained silent, and she'd begun to hope they might have more time to explore these discoveries before facing whatever complications awaited. Through the morning haze, a sleek yacht approached the island's main dock. Even from a distance, Sarah could see it wasn't Thorne's vessel. This one was larger, more imposing, with a distinctly military bearing. We need to hide this, Marcus said urgently, already beginning to cover the tablet with sand and debris. Whatever this represents, it's too important to let just anyone see it. Emma carefully folded her sketches and tucked them into her backpack, while Jake helped camouflage their excavation site. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities: Coast Guard, other interested parties, or perhaps someone who'd been watching their activities from afar. As they made their way back toward the main compound, Sarah caught sight of the yacht's passengers disembarking. 3 figures in dark suits moved with purposeful efficiency, while a 4th person, a woman with silver hair, gestured toward the island's interior as if giving directions. They know where they're going, Sarah murmured, pulling her children closer. This isn't a casual visit. They slipped through the back entrance of the main house, gathering in the kitchen where they could observe the approaching visitors through the window. Marcus pulled out his tablet, quickly uploading Emma's sketches to his secure cloud storage. "If something happens to these physical copies," he explained quietly, "at least we'll have backup." The knock on the front door came exactly 7 minutes later, 3 sharp raps that somehow conveyed both authority and impatience. Sarah took a deep breath, smoothed her hair, and walked to answer it. The silver-haired woman stood at the threshold, flanked by 2 men who looked more like corporate lawyers than security personnel. Her smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to seem friendly, controlled enough to suggest serious business. "Miss Chen? I'm Dr. Victoria Ashford from the Maritime Archaeological Institute. I believe you've made some interesting discoveries during your stay here." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm sorry. I think there's been some misunderstanding. We're just here on vacation." "Please," Dr. Ashford interrupted gently, stepping forward. "We both know that's not entirely accurate. Our satellite imaging detected the excavation activity yesterday evening. Quite impressive work, actually, especially given your limited resources." The woman's knowledge sent ice through Sarah's veins. They'd been watched, monitored, possibly from the moment they'd arrived. How much did this Dr. Ashford know? And more importantly, who had sent her? "I'm afraid I'll need to see any artifacts or documentation you've uncovered," Dr. Ashford continued, her tone remaining pleasant but firm. "This island contains archaeological treasures of international significance. I'm sure you understand the importance of proper preservation and study." Behind Sarah, she could hear Marcus quietly ushering the children toward the back of the house. Emma's sketches suddenly felt like the most valuable thing on the island, and potentially the most dangerous. "Of course," Sarah said carefully, "though I should mention, we haven't found anything particularly noteworthy. Some old stones, but nothing that seemed historically significant." Dr. Ashford's smile never wavered, but something shifted in her eyes. "Miss Chen, I think we both know that statement isn't entirely truthful. The island's previous surveys indicated substantial pre-Columbian settlements. Your excavation site suggests you've located at least one major artifact." The standoff stretched between them, 2 women measuring each other's resolve while the morning sun climbed higher. Sarah realized that whatever game she'd unknowingly entered by accepting Thorne's offer had just become infinitely more complex. The journal's leather binding cracked as Sarah opened it wider, revealing page after page of cramped handwriting interspersed with detailed sketches. The candlelight flickered across diagrams of the island's coastline, marked with symbols she didn't recognize. Her heart hammered as she traced a finger along what appeared to be a map of underground tunnels snaking beneath their feet. "Dr. Helena Voss, 1987. She read aloud from the first entry. "Day 1 of excavation. The locals were right about this place. Something extraordinary lies beneath the surface." The entries detailed months of archaeological work, describing the discovery of chambers filled with crystalline formations that seemed to pulse with their own light. Voss wrote about energy readings that defied explanation and symbols carved into stone that predated any known civilization in the region. Sarah's blood ran cold when she reached an entry dated 3 months later. "The children are showing remarkable improvement. Their cellular regeneration rates have increased by 300%. Whatever force emanates from the crystals below seems to target genetic abnormalities specifically." A soft footstep echoed from somewhere in the tunnel behind her. Sarah's head snapped up, listening intently. The sound came again, deliberate, cautious. Someone was following her path through the underground passages. She quickly photographed several pages with her phone, grateful the device still held battery despite having no signal. The journal's later entries grew increasingly frantic, describing how Blackwood Industries had funded the research but demanded exclusive access to the findings. Voss had hidden her work, afraid of what the corporation might do with such power. The footsteps grew closer. Sarah stuffed the journal into her jacket and extinguished the candle, plunging the chamber into absolute darkness. She pressed herself against the stone wall, barely breathing as she listened to the approaching presence. A beam of light swept across the chamber entrance. Marcus's voice called softly, "Sarah, I know you're down here." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by suspicion. How had he found her so easily in this maze of tunnels? "I'm here," she said, emerging from the shadows. Marcus lowered his flashlight, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be wandering these passages alone. They're not stable. Funny, they seem solid enough to me." Sarah studied his face in the dim light. "How did you know where to find me?" "I saw you heading toward the old research station. These tunnels all connect." He gestured toward a passage she hadn't noticed before. "What did you find down here?" Sarah's hand moved instinctively to the journal hidden in her jacket. "Just empty rooms. Nothing interesting." Marcus stepped closer, and she caught something in his eyes, a flicker of knowledge he was trying to conceal. "Sarah, I need you to trust me. There are things about this island, about why Blackwood brought you here, that you don't understand yet. Then explain them to me." He was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. Finally he said, "Come with me. There's something you need to see." Against her better judgment, Sarah followed him deeper into the tunnel system. They walked in silence for several minutes before emerging into a vast underground cavern, her breath caught in her throat. The space was enormous, its ceiling disappearing into darkness above. But what made her gasp were the formations covering the walls, crystalline structures that pulsed with a soft blue-green light, exactly as described in Voss's journal. The air itself seemed to hum with energy, making the hair on her arms stand on end. "My God," she whispered. "The island sits on top of what might be the largest deposit of quantum-coherent crystals ever discovered," Marcus said quietly. "They interact with biological systems in ways we're still trying to understand." Sarah turned to face him, pieces of the puzzle clicking together. You've known all along what this place is. I've been monitoring the island for years. When Blackwood reached out to you, I had to make sure you and your children would be safe." "Safe from what?" Marcus's expression darkened. "Blackwood didn't choose your family randomly, Sarah. Emma and Lily's genetic conditions make them perfect test subjects. The crystal's healing properties are most effective on individuals with specific genetic markers your daughters possess. The implications hit her like a physical blow. He's using my children as test subjects." "Not if I can help it." Marcus pulled out a satellite phone, its screen glowing in the crystal light. "I've been trying to get word to the outside world about what's happening here, but Blackwood has the island locked down tight. No communications in or out." Sarah felt the weight of the journal against her ribs. Dr. Voss had faced the same dilemma decades ago, caught between a miraculous discovery and the ruthless ambitions of those who would exploit it. But unlike Voss, Sarah wasn't alone. "What do you propose we do?" she asked. Marcus looked up at the pulsing crystals above them. "We find a way to protect your children while exposing the truth about this place. But first, we need to get back to the surface before Blackwood realizes we're both missing." The wooden stairs groaned under Maya's weight as she descended into the darkness beneath the stone chamber. Her flashlight beam cut through air thick with humidity and something else, an earthy sweetness that reminded her of blooming jasmine. Each step took her deeper into what felt like the island's beating heart. The staircase opened into a vast underground cavern, its ceiling lost in shadows above. Bioluminescent moss traced intricate patterns along the walls, pulsing with the same rhythm she'd felt in the stone chamber. The light was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, and Maya had to force herself to focus on the path ahead. Maya approached cautiously, her archaeological training warring with an inexplicable sense of reverence. The water reflected her flashlight beam, but beneath the surface, she could see more symbols carved into the pool's bottom. These glowed with their own inner light, forming patterns that hurt her eyes to follow for too long. A soft splash made her spin around. Liam stood at the bottom of the stairs, his clothes soaked through. "How did you—" Maya began, then stopped. Her son's eyes held that same distant quality she'd noticed earlier, but now they reflected the cavern's ethereal glow. "She's calling," Liam said simply. walking toward the pool with measured steps. "Can't you hear her?" Maya strained to listen. Beneath the drip of water and her own heartbeat, she caught something, a melody so faint it might have been imagination. But Liam clearly heard more. "Who's calling, sweetheart?" Maya reached for his hand, but he stepped just out of range. "The Mother," he replied, and Maya's blood chilled. The same title mentioned in the journal entries she'd found in Hawthorne's study. She's been waiting so long. They all have. As if summoned by his words, figures emerged from the shadows between the cavern's columns. Not solid forms, but translucent shapes that flickered like candle flames. Men, women, children, dozens of them, all watching with expressions of desperate hope. Maya pulled out her phone to call for help, but the screen remained black despite her frantic button pressing. The electromagnetic interference was stronger here, or perhaps something else entirely was at work. "Liam, we need to leave, now." She made another grab for his hand, but he'd already reached the pool's edge. "She's not evil, Mom. She's just lonely." Liam knelt beside the water, his fingers trailing through its surface. Where he touched, ripples of light spread outward, and the symbols on the pool's bottom blazed brighter. All these people came looking for something: money, power, escape. But she gave them what they actually needed. What did she give them? Maya whispered, though she dreaded the answer. "Peace." Liam's voice carried harmonics that didn't belong to a 12-year-old boy. Purpose, a chance to be part of something greater than their small, frightened lives. The ghostly figures pressed closer, and Maya could see their faces more clearly now. She recognized some from old newspaper clippings she'd found, missing persons reports from over the decades, all the people who'd come to the island and never left. Liam looked up at her, and for a moment his eyes cleared. "Mom, I'm scared. There's something in my head showing me things, beautiful things, but—" He shuddered. "I don't think I can fight it much longer." Maya dropped to her knees beside him, finally managing to grab his hands. They felt ice-cold, despite the cavern's warmth. "Then don't fight it alone. We'll figure this out together." The water in the pool began to churn, and something vast moved beneath its surface. Maya caught glimpses of scales that gleamed like mother-of-pearl, tentacles that could have wrapped around a building, and eyes older than human civilization. But instead of terror, she felt an overwhelming sadness, ancient and profound. The entity in the pool wasn't a monster. It was a being so far removed from its original existence that it had forgotten what it meant to be anything but lonely. The island's visitors hadn't been consumed or destroyed. They'd been absorbed into something that desperately needed connection, but didn't understand the difference between communion and consumption. "She wants to keep you," Maya told Liam, understanding flooding through her, but not out of malice. "She doesn't remember how to let go." The ghostly figures around them began to weep, soundless tears that nonetheless echoed through the cavern like rainfall. They weren't prisoners, Maya realized. They were willing participants who'd traded their individual existence for the promise of never being alone again. But her children deserved the choice to make their own mistakes, to find their own purposes. "There has to be another way," Maya whispered to the ancient presence stirring in the depths. The symbols carved into the cavern wall seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy as Elena traced them with her fingertips. Each marking felt warm beneath her touch, as if the stone itself held life. Marcus stood beside her, his archaeological expertise evident in the reverent way he examined the ancient text. "These aren't just decorative," he murmured, pulling out a small notebook to sketch the intricate patterns. "They're instructions, a manual of sorts." "For what?" Elena's voice echoed in the vast underground chamber they'd discovered beneath the island's central plateau. Before Marcus could answer, a low rumble shook the cavern. Dust rained from the ceiling as the ground beneath their feet vibrated with increasing intensity. Elena grabbed Marcus's arm, her maternal instinct screaming at her to return to the surface, to her children. "The island's responding to something," Marcus said, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "These symbols, they're activating." The carvings began to glow with a soft blue light, illuminating passages that stretched deeper into the earth. Elena felt drawn forward despite every rational thought telling her to flee. The light seemed to call to something deep within her, awakening a connection she couldn't understand. "Elena, look at this section." Marcus pointed to a cluster of symbols that depicted what appeared to be a family, 2 adults and 2 children, standing before a great tree. "It's almost like they knew you were coming." A chill ran down Elena's spine. The resemblance to her own family was uncanny. Below the family image, more symbols showed the tree withering, then being restored by some kind of ceremony involving the 4 figures. "That's impossible," she whispered. But even as she spoke, she remembered Nathaniel Cross's strange certainty when he'd offered her the island. His knowing smile, his insistence that this place would provide exactly what her family needed. The rumbling intensified, and somewhere in the distance, Elena heard her children calling her name. Panic seized her as she realized how long they'd been underground. She turned toward the cavern entrance, but Marcus caught her wrist. "Elena, wait. There's something else." His voice was urgent, almost desperate. "These final symbols, they're a warning. They show what happens if the ceremony isn't completed." She looked back at the wall and saw images that made her blood run cold. The island splitting apart, the surrounding ocean turning dark, and most terrifying of all, the family figures fading into nothingness. "Mom! Mom, where are you?" Sophie's voice echoed from above, closer now, tinged with fear. Elena broke free from Marcus's grip and ran toward the surface, her heart pounding. She emerged from the hidden entrance they'd discovered behind a curtain of vines to find both her children standing at the edge of the plateau, their faces pale with worry. "We felt the earthquake," Tommy said, rushing into her arms. "The whole island shook, and we couldn't find you anywhere." Sophie hung back, her teenage composure cracking. The animals all ran into the forest. Even the birds stopped singing. "What's happening, Mom?" Elena pulled both children close, breathing in their familiar scent, grounding herself in their reality. But even as she held them, she could feel the island's energy pulsing beneath her feet, waiting, expecting something from her. Marcus emerged from the cavern, his notebook clutched tightly in his hand. His expression was grim as he approached the small family group. "The tremors are getting stronger," he said quietly. "Whatever this place is, whatever it's meant to do, I think it's running out of time." Elena looked out over the island that had seemed like salvation just days ago. The lush vegetation that had welcomed them now seemed to shimmer with an urgent energy. The ancient trees swayed without wind, and the very air hummed with expectation. "There's something you're not telling us," Sophie said, her perceptive gaze moving between Elena and Marcus. "This isn't just about Dad's debts anymore, is it?" Elena met her daughter's eyes, seeing David's intelligence reflected there, and made a decision that would change everything. The time for protection through ignorance had passed. Whatever the island demanded, whatever choice lay ahead, her children deserved the truth. "No, sweetheart, it's about something much bigger than that." She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what came next. "This island, it's not just a sanctuary. It's been waiting for us, for our family specifically." Tommy looked up at her with wide eyes. "Waiting for what, Mom?" Elena glanced back at the hidden cavern entrance, then at Marcus's notebook filled with ancient symbols and impossible prophecies. The island pulsed again beneath their feet, more insistently this time, and she knew their peaceful days of discovery were over. "To choose," she said simply, "to choose what we're willing to sacrifice to build the future we want." The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of something ancient and powerful, something that had been sleeping beneath paradise and was now stirring awake. The ancient stone chamber pulsed with an otherworldly light as Sarah stepped across the threshold, her children close behind her. The walls were covered in the same intricate symbols they'd found throughout the island, but here they seemed alive, shifting and glowing with each heartbeat of the mysterious energy that emanated from the center of the room. "Mom, look at this," Emma whispered, her voice filled with wonder rather than fear. She approached a series of carved panels that depicted scenes of healing, hands mending broken bones, light driving away darkness, children growing strong under protective canopies of strange trees. Marcus hung back near the entrance, his skeptical nature warring with the undeniable evidence before his eyes. "This can't be real," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The very air around them hummed with power, making the hair on their arms stand on end. At the chamber's heart sat a crystalline formation, unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It rose from the floor like a frozen flame, its faceted surface casting rainbow patterns across the ancient walls. Within its depths, something moved, not quite light, not quite liquid, but something that seemed to respond to their presence. The stories weren't just mythology, Sarah breathed, remembering the journal entries they'd found in Blackwood's study. The billionaire hadn't just purchased this island as a retreat, he'd been searching for something specific, something his researchers had spent decades trying to understand. Emma reached toward the crystal, and Sarah's maternal instincts flared. "Don't touch," but it was too late. The moment Emma's fingertips made contact with the surface, the chamber erupted in brilliant light. The symbols on the walls blazed like stars, and a sound like distant music filled the air. Sarah watched in amazement as the chronic fatigue that had shadowed her daughter's face for months simply melted away, replaced by a vitality that seemed to radiate from within. "I can feel it," Emma gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's like everything that was broken is being fixed." Marcus stepped forward despite his reservations, drawn by the transformation in his sister. "Em, are you okay?" But as the initial wonder faded, Sarah's mind raced with implications. Power like this didn't exist without consequences. Throughout history, miraculous discoveries had always come with a price. She thought of Blackwood's desperate letters, his frantic research notes, the way he'd spoken of the island as both salvation and curse. "We need to understand what this is before we—" The sound of footsteps echoed from the passage behind them, heavy boots on stone, moving with purpose. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the implications. Someone else knew about this place. Someone else had been waiting. "Get behind the crystal," she whispered urgently to her children, but the footsteps were already too close. 3 figures emerged from the shadows of the entrance, led by a woman in expensive outdoor gear, whose cold eyes immediately fixed on the crystalline formation. Behind her came 2 men who looked more like military contractors than researchers, their hands resting casually on weapons concealed beneath their jackets. "Dr. Sarah Chen," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent Sarah couldn't place. "I'm Dr. Vega. We've been waiting for you to find this place." "Waiting?" Sarah positioned herself between the newcomers and her children. "Who are you? What do you want?" "We represent certain interests that have been monitoring Mr. Blackwood's research for some time," Dr. Vega replied, stepping closer to the crystal. "This discovery is far too important to remain in private hands. The healing properties alone could revolutionize medicine, but the energy signature suggests applications far beyond simple therapy." Marcus moved protectively near his sister, and Sarah noticed how Emma seemed to glow with residual energy from her contact with the crystal. Whatever this thing was, it had already changed her daughter in ways they didn't yet understand. "Blackwood brought us here for a reason," Sarah said carefully. "He wanted us to find this." "Yes, we know about his sentimental arrangements," Dr. Vega replied dismissively. "A dying man's final gesture." But he was naive to think he could control something of this magnitude. "Step away from the formation, please." The 2 men moved to flank them, and Sarah realized with growing dread that these people had no intention of letting them leave. They'd been led to this discovery like lambs to slaughter, their desperation used as a tool to unlock secrets that others had been seeking for years. But as fear threatened to overwhelm her, Sarah felt something else, a connection to the island itself, as if the ancient power recognized her family's need and was preparing to respond. The symbols on the walls pulsed brighter, and she could swear she heard Emma whisper something in a language she didn't recognize. Whatever happened next, Sarah realized, would determine not just their fate, but the fate of the mysterious force that had already begun to change everything they thought they knew about the world. The stone chamber trembled as Sarah pressed her palm against the glowing crystal formation. Ancient symbols blazed to life along the walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with their own intelligence. Behind her, Marcus grabbed Elena's shoulder as chunks of ceiling began to rain down. "Mom, we need to get out of here!" Elena shouted over the growing rumble that echoed through the underground passages. And Blackwood knew. He had always known. "The children," she whispered, her voice barely audible as the visions continued. "He's not trying to help them. He's studying them." Marcus stepped closer, fighting against the increasingly violent tremors. "Sarah, what are you seeing?" Through the crystal's memory, she witnessed Blackwood's previous guests, other families brought to the island under similar pretenses. She saw children with various conditions, all carefully selected, all monitored through hidden devices embedded throughout what they'd believed was their sanctuary. The island's natural properties didn't just provide healing, they amplified certain neurological patterns, creating a unique resonance that Blackwood's team had been harvesting for decades. "We're not refugees," Sarah gasped, pulling her hand away from the crystal as the chamber shuddered violently. "We're specimens." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Every kindness, every gesture of support from Blackwood's staff, every moment of hope she'd allowed herself to feel, it had all been carefully orchestrated. The house with its perfect accommodations, the gardens where her children played, even the medical improvements they'd seen in Jake's condition. It was all part of an elaborate experiment. Elena grabbed her mother's arm. "The tunnel's collapsing. Whatever you found, we can figure it out later." They ran through the passages as the ancient structure groaned around them. The crystal's light dimmed behind them, but the knowledge it had shared burned bright in Sarah's mind. She understood now why the island had been kept secret, why Blackwood had gone to such lengths to maintain the illusion of isolation. The electromagnetic anomalies that made this place special also made it invisible to most detection methods. It was the perfect laboratory. They emerged from the underground complex to find dawn breaking over the island. In the early light, Sarah could see their house in the distance, peaceful and welcoming as always. But now she noticed things she'd missed before. The subtle geometric patterns in the garden layout, the way certain trees had been positioned to form sight lines, the almost imperceptible hum that emanated from hidden equipment. "Jake," she breathed, panic seizing her chest. They'd left him sleeping in the house, trusting in the safety that had proven to be an illusion. They sprinted across the landscape, Sarah's mind racing faster than her feet. The improvements in Jake's seizures, his increased alertness and verbal communication, how much of it was real healing and how much was the result of whatever they were doing to him. The thought of her son being used as a test subject sent rage coursing through her veins. The house appeared empty when they burst through the front door, but Sarah could hear voices from the medical wing that had been added shortly after their arrival. Voices she didn't recognize. She crept down the hallway, Marcus and Elena close behind, and peered through the partially open door. Jake lay on an examination table, electrodes attached to his head, while 3 technicians in white coats monitored screens filled with brainwave patterns. Dr. Chen stood among them, no longer the compassionate physician who had been treating her son, but clearly the lead researcher in whatever project they were conducting. "The resonance levels are off the charts," one technician murmured. "The island's amplification effect, combined with his unique neural pathways, is producing exactly the patterns we need." "How long until extraction?" Dr. Chen asked. "The neural mapping should be complete within 48 hours. After that, we won't need the subject anymore." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Subject. Her son had become a subject, and they were planning to extract something from his brain. The healing had never been the point. It was just a side effect of whatever process they were using to study him. She backed away from the door, her mind calculating frantically. The boat Blackwood had used to bring them here came every 2 weeks. The next arrival wasn't for another 10 days. The communications equipment she'd seen was all controlled by his staff. They were truly trapped, surrounded by water with no way to call for help. But the crystal chamber had shown her something else. The island's original inhabitants had built more than just monitoring equipment. They had created defenses, and somewhere in the underground complex lay the control systems that could either save her family or destroy them all. The cave entrance yawned before them like a mouth frozen in an eternal scream. Maya's flashlight beam danced across ancient symbols carved deep into the volcanic rock, their meanings lost to time but their intent unmistakably ominous. Behind her, Emma clutched the leather journal they'd found in Blackwood's study, its pages filled with diagrams that perfectly matched the markings before them. "Mom, I don't think we should go in there," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind that seemed to howl with increasing fury around the island's perimeter. Maya turned to see her daughter's pale face, illuminated by the flashlight's glow. At 16, Emma had always been the cautious one, but now her fear seemed rooted in something deeper than teenage anxiety. The journal trembled in her hands as she pointed to a particular page. "Look at this entry from 1847. Blackwood's great-great-grandfather wrote about people going into these caves and never coming out. He called it the island's hunger." A chill ran down Maya's spine that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. They'd been on Blackwood's supposedly deserted island for 3 weeks now, and each day brought new revelations about their host's true intentions. The man who'd promised them sanctuary from their financial ruin had been less than truthful about the island's history. "Where's your brother?" Maya asked, suddenly realizing that 12-year-old Jake's constant chatter had fallen silent. Emma spun around, her flashlight sweeping the rocky terrain behind them. "He was right here a minute ago." "Jake!" she called out, her voice cracking with panic. The wind seemed to swallow her words, carrying them into the darkness that pressed against them from all sides. Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she added her voice to Emma's. "Jake! Jake, answer me!" A faint sound echoed from within the cave, a laugh that was unmistakably Jake's, but distorted somehow, as if filtered through water or coming from a great distance. He went in. Emma breathed, staring at the cave entrance with wide eyes. "But how? We were watching the entrance the whole time." Maya grabbed the journal from her daughter's hands, flipping frantically through its yellowed pages. Blackwood's ancestor had documented everything with meticulous detail: the island's volcanic origins, the indigenous people who'd once lived here, and their sudden disappearance in 1823, but it was the more recent entries that made Maya's blood run cold. "Listen to this," she said, reading aloud by flashlight. "The caves serve as conduits to the island's core, where the ancient power still pulses with each tide. Those who enter willingly become vessels for something far older than human understanding. The island chooses its guardians carefully, preferring the young and the desperate." Another laugh echoed from the depths, followed by Jake's voice calling out, "Mom, Emma, you have to see this, it's incredible." But something in his tone was wrong. Jake's voice carried an odd resonance, as if he was speaking in harmony with something else or someone else. Maya made her decision. "We're going in. Are you insane?" Emma grabbed her mother's arm. The journal says a lot of things, but it doesn't change the fact that your brother is in there." Maya's voice carried the steel that had gotten her family through 2 years of mounting debt and her ex-husband's abandonment. "I didn't bring you both here to lose either of you to some old family curse." They stepped into the cave together, their flashlights revealing a tunnel that stretched far deeper into the island than should have been possible. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and covered with more of the ancient symbols. As they walked, Maya noticed that the symbols seemed to shift and change in her peripheral vision, rearranging themselves into new patterns when she wasn't looking directly at them. The temperature dropped noticeably with each step, and their breath began to mist in the still air. But strangest of all was the sound, a rhythmic pulsing that seemed to emanate from the rock itself like a massive heartbeat. "Mom," Emma whispered, "look at the journal." Maya glanced down to see that the pages were now glowing with a soft, phosphorescent light. The diagrams seemed to move on the paper, the symbols rotating and shifting to match those on the cave walls around them. Jake's laughter echoed again, closer now but somehow coming from all directions at once. "I understand now," his voice called out, but the words carried an adult weight that made Maya's skin crawl. "The island isn't hungry, Mom. It's lonely. It's been waiting for a family to stay forever." The question was whether they would recognize him when they did. The ancient chamber trembled as Sarah pressed her palm against the crystalline surface of the altar. Energy surged through her body like liquid lightning, and suddenly she could see, truly see, what the island had been trying to show her all along. Visions flooded her mind, the original inhabitants of this land, a civilization that had learned to harness the Earth's natural energy. They hadn't been primitive at all, but incredibly advanced, living in harmony with forces that modern science barely understood. The crystal formations weren't random geological accidents. They were a carefully constructed network, designed to channel and amplify the island's inherent power. But something had gone wrong. Sarah saw flashes of the final days, desperate rituals, attempts to contain something that had grown beyond their control. The energy they'd cultivated had begun to twist, to hunger, demanding more than they could safely give. In the end, they'd made the ultimate sacrifice, binding their life force to the crystals themselves to prevent the power from spreading beyond the island's shores. "Mom!" Emma's voice cut through the visions, yanking Sarah back to the present. Her daughter stood at the chamber's entrance, eyes wide with terror. "The whole island is shaking, and Dad, he's acting really strange." Sarah pulled her hand away from the altar, the connection severing abruptly. The knowledge remained, though, burning in her mind like an ember. She understood now why Blackwood had brought them here, why he'd been so insistent about the children specifically. The island's power was fading after centuries of dormancy, and it needed young, untainted life force to reawaken fully. "Where is he?" Sarah grabbed Emma's shoulders, fighting to keep her voice steady. "By the beach, with Jake. They were helping Dr. Chen with something, but when I got there, Dad just kept staring at the water. He wouldn't answer when I called his name." Sarah's blood ran cold, the pull of the ocean. She'd felt it herself, that strange compulsion to walk toward the waves, but she'd resisted. Mark, exhausted from days of stress and fear, might not have the same strength. They ran through the jungle, dodging falling branches as the tremors intensified. The island seemed to be coming alive around them, responding to Sarah's brief contact with the altar. Bioluminescent flowers blazed brighter, and the air itself hummed with electricity. The beach came into view, and Sarah's worst fears materialized. Mark stood waist-deep in the churning water, his face blank and peaceful. Jake was beside him, smaller waves lapping at his chest, both of them walking steadily deeper. "Mark!" Sarah screamed, but he didn't turn. Neither did Jake. Dr. Chen stood on the shore, her equipment scattered around her feet. She was shouting into a radio, her usual composure completely shattered. "The readings are off the charts. The entire geological structure is destabilizing." Sarah plunged into the water without hesitation. The ocean was unnaturally warm, and she could feel the same energy that had flowed from the altar pulsing beneath the waves. It whispered to her, promising peace, promising answers to all her problems. All she had to do was let go, stop fighting, and walk a little deeper. She gritted her teeth and pushed forward, grabbing Jake first. Her son's eyes were glassy, unfocused, but he didn't resist as she hauled him back toward shore. The water seemed to fight her, growing thicker, more viscous, but she managed to get him to Emma. "Keep him here," she gasped. "No matter what happens, don't let him go back in the water." Mark was farther out now, the waves reaching his shoulders. Sarah dove forward, swimming hard against the current that seemed determined to pull her in the wrong direction. When she reached him, his skin was cold despite the warm water, and his pulse was slow, almost hypnotic. "Mark, listen to me," she said, treading water beside him. "This isn't real. The island is influencing you. You need to fight it." He turned to look at her, and for a moment his eyes cleared. "Sarah? What are we doing out here?" Then confusion clouded his features again. "The water, it's so beautiful, Can't you hear it singing? Sarah could hear it, a low, melodious hum that seemed to come from the depths themselves. It was beautiful, seductive, and absolutely terrifying. She wrapped her arms around Mark and began swimming backward, using every ounce of strength she possessed. The shore seemed impossibly far away. Each stroke was a battle, not just against the water, but against the growing desire to simply stop, to let the ocean embrace them both. But then she saw Emma on the beach, holding Jake, both of them watching with desperate hope, and something fierce ignited in her chest. She was their mother. She had brought them to this place, trusted Blackwood's promises, and now it was her responsibility to get them out alive. The island could offer its seductive whispers all it wanted, but it would not have her family. With a final surge of determination, Sarah dragged Mark through the shallows and onto the sand. He collapsed, coughing up seawater, his eyes gradually focusing. Behind them, the ocean continued its hypnotic song, waiting patiently for the next opportunity to claim what it believed was rightfully its own. The ancient chamber trembled as Sarah pressed her palm against the pulsing crystalline heart embedded in the stone wall. Energy coursed through her fingers, and suddenly the island's memories flooded her consciousness. Centuries of guardians who had protected this place, each facing the same impossible choice she now confronted. Marcus stepped closer, his eyes reflecting the crystal's ethereal glow. "You're beginning to understand, aren't you? This island doesn't just contain power, it is power. The question is whether you're strong enough to wield it." Sarah jerked her hand away, the visions still spinning in her mind. She had seen the truth. The island's energy could indeed heal Emma's condition and secure her family's future, but it would require her to become something more than human. The transformation was irreversible, binding her to this place forever. "My children," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crystal's harmonic resonance. "I won't abandon them." "You wouldn't be abandoning them," Marcus replied, circling the chamber with predatory grace. "You'd be ensuring their survival. Emma's genetic condition will only worsen without intervention, but with the island's power flowing through you, you could heal her completely." Through the chamber's entrance, footsteps echoed in the corridors above. Sarah's heart lurched. Tom and the children were looking for her. She had told them to stay in the cottage, but her prolonged absence had clearly worried them. Marcus heard the sounds too, his expression hardening. "They're coming. You need to decide now, Sarah. The ritual can only be performed during the convergence, and that window is closing." The crystal's pulse quickened, and Sarah felt its pull like a magnetic force, trying to draw her deeper into the chamber. Ancient symbols carved into the walls began to glow, responding to her proximity. She was the key Marcus had been searching for, someone with the rare genetic markers that allowed communion with the island's consciousness. "Mom!" Emma's voice carried down from somewhere above, weak but determined. Sarah's resolve crystallized. Her daughter had followed them despite her illness, probably supported by David and Tom. The thought of Emma struggling through the underground passages because of her choices tore at Sarah's heart. "There's another way," she said suddenly, turning to face Marcus. "You said the island chooses its guardians. What if it chose wrong?" Marcus's confident demeanor flickered. "What are you suggesting? You've been trying to control this power for years, but maybe that's exactly why it won't work for you. The island doesn't want a master, it wants a partner." Sarah moved toward the crystal again, but this time she approached it differently. Instead of seeking to claim its power, she opened her mind to its ancient wisdom. The visions returned, but now she saw them clearly. Each guardian had succeeded not by dominating the island's energy, but by finding harmony with it. "The convergence isn't about taking control," she continued, pieces falling into place. "It's about achieving balance. You've been approaching this like a conquest when it requires surrender." Marcus stepped forward urgently. "You don't understand the complexities involved. I've spent decades studying these forces and gotten nowhere," Sarah interrupted, "because you're trying to force a connection that can only be given freely." The footsteps above grew closer, and she heard Tom calling her name. Time was running out, but Sarah finally understood what needed to happen. The island's power could indeed save Emma, but not through the violent transformation Marcus envisioned. She placed both hands on the crystal, and this time she didn't try to draw energy from it. Instead, she offered something in return: her love for her children, her determination to protect them, her willingness to sacrifice for their future. The crystal's resonance shifted, becoming warmer, more welcoming. Marcus watched in growing alarm as the chamber filled with soft golden light. "Stop! You don't know what you're doing!" But Sarah did know. The visions had shown her the truth. The island's guardians hadn't been prisoners bound to this place forever. They had been bridges connecting the ancient power to the world beyond. Each had eventually passed the responsibility to the next guardian and returned to their lives, forever changed, but not enslaved. The crystal's energy flowed through her now, not violent and consuming as Marcus had described, but gentle and healing. She felt Emma's genetic markers shifting in response, the flawed sequences correcting themselves through quantum entanglement across the distance between them. "It's working," she breathed, tears streaming down her face as she sensed her daughter's cellular structure stabilizing. Marcus lunged toward her, desperate to interrupt the process, but the chamber's energy field repelled him. "You're ruining everything. That power was meant for healing," Sarah finished. "Not conquest, not control. Healing." Above them, the voices grew closer. Soon her family would find this place, and she would have to explain everything. But Emma would be whole. David would understand why they had come here. And Tom, brave, loyal Tom, would help them face whatever came next. The crystal's pulse began to slow, its work complete. Sarah felt the ancient consciousness settling into peaceful dormancy, its purpose fulfilled once again. The chamber beneath the island pulsed with an otherworldly light as Sarah pressed her palm against the ancient stone altar. The moment her skin made contact, visions flooded her mind, centuries of guardians who had stood where she now stood, each facing the same impossible choice. The crystalline formations embedded in the walls resonated with her touch, their humming growing louder until it seemed to vibrate through her very bones. "Mom, what's happening?" Emma's voice cut through the supernatural chorus, grounding Sarah in the present moment. Sarah kept her hand on the altar, feeling the island's consciousness merge with her own. Images cascaded through her awareness, Marcus Blackwood's true purpose revealed in stark clarity. He hadn't brought them here as refugees. He'd brought them as the final pieces in a puzzle he'd been solving for decades. The island had been calling to him just as it had called to others before him, but he lacked the genetic markers necessary to unlock its deepest secrets. Sarah's bloodline, traced back through generations she'd never known existed, held the key. "He's coming," she whispered, the knowledge flowing through her like ice water. "Marcus isn't just some billionaire philanthropist. He's been searching for our family for years." The sound of explosives echoed from above, dust raining down from the ceiling. Marcus had grown tired of waiting for them to emerge voluntarily. Through the island's enhanced perception, Sarah could sense his team methodically destroying the upper chambers, working their way down toward the heart of the sanctuary. "There has to be another way out," Jake said, examining the walls with newfound urgency. His earlier skepticism had evaporated completely after witnessing the island's response to his mother's touch. "There is," Sarah replied, the ancient knowledge now part of her understanding. "But it requires a choice that will change everything." She turned to face her children, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time since arriving on the island. Emma's intuitive connection to the natural world, Jake's analytical mind that could grasp complex patterns. They weren't just her children. They were the next generation of guardians, inheriting abilities they'd never known they possessed. "The island isn't just a sanctuary," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite the chaos above. "It's a repository of knowledge that could reshape how humanity interacts with the natural world. The technology here isn't technology as we understand it. It's a symbiosis between consciousness and the living earth itself." Another explosion, closer this time. The crystal formations flickered momentarily before resuming their steady glow. Marcus wants to extract that knowledge, commercialize it, control it, Sarah continued. But the island won't let itself be enslaved. It's been waiting for the right guardians to either protect its secrets or— She paused, the weight of the alternative settling over her. Or destroy them forever rather than let them fall into the wrong hands. Emma stepped forward, her young face showing a wisdom beyond her years. That's why you can feel everything here, isn't it? It's not magic, it's inheritance. Sarah nodded, pride and terror warring in her chest. We have minutes to decide. I can activate the island's defensive systems, create barriers that will keep Marcus and his team out permanently, but doing so will bind us here as guardians. We'll never be able to leave. What's the alternative? Jake asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. We trigger the island's self-destruct protocol. Everything here gets buried beneath the ocean floor, taking its secrets with it. We escape in the confusion, but humanity loses something that could have solved climate change, resource scarcity, the fundamental disconnection between civilization and nature. The sound of drilling joined the explosions. Marcus's team had found the main shaft leading to their chamber. How long do we have? Emma asked. 10 minutes, maybe less, Sarah replied, the island's awareness feeding her real-time information about the approaching threat. Jake moved to stand beside the altar, his hand hovering over the stone surface. What happens if we choose wrong? There is no wrong choice, Sarah said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. There's only the choice we can live with. The drilling sounds grew louder, accompanied by voices echoing down the shaft. Marcus's voice rose above the others, urgent and commanding. He knew how close he was to claiming his prize. Emma joined them at the altar, her small hand finding her mother's. Whatever we choose together. The three of them stood connected to the ancient stone, feeling the island's pulse synchronize with their heartbeats. Through their shared touch, they could sense each other's thoughts, fears, and hopes. The island waited patiently for their decision, its consciousness vast and accepting. Above them, the first sounds of metal striking stone announced that Marcus's team had breached the final barrier. Time had run out for deliberation. The ancient chamber trembled as Maya pressed her palm against the crystalline heart of the island. Energy coursed through her veins like liquid fire, and suddenly she understood everything, the billionaire's desperation, the island's purpose, and the terrible choice that lay before her. Visions flooded her mind, civilizations rising and falling, the crystal network spanning continents, and always the same pattern of discovery, exploitation, and collapse. The island wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a seed bank for human consciousness itself, designed to preserve and restart civilization when the inevitable end came. "Mom!" Sarah's voice cut through the revelations. "The whole island is lighting up!" Maya pulled her hand back, gasping. Through the chamber's translucent walls, she could see veins of light spreading across the landscape like a vast neural network awakening. The ground beneath their feet hummed with power. Dr. Chen stumbled backward, his tablet forgotten. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. Whatever you just activated—" "I didn't activate anything," Maya said, though she knew that wasn't entirely true. Her touch had been a key, but the island had been waiting, building toward this moment for decades. It was already happening. We just arrived at the right time, or the wrong time, depending on how she looked at it. Marcus stepped into the chamber, his usual composure cracking. "The transformation is accelerating beyond our projections. We have perhaps an hour before the process becomes irreversible." "What process?" Sarah demanded, but Maya already knew. The visions had shown her. "The island is preparing to launch," Maya said quietly. "Not physically, dimensionally. It's going to phase out of this reality and into a parallel space, where it can preserve everything we've built here, while the outside world—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Marcus did. "While the outside world faces what's coming. The climate collapse, the resource wars, the breakdown of civilization as we know it. The island will survive in a pocket dimension, ready to emerge when the Earth heals and everyone else dies, Sarah said flatly. Not dies, Marcus corrected. Continues on their current trajectory. The island can't save everyone. The power requirements alone would tear apart the fabric of space-time. But it can save a small population, preserve human knowledge and culture, maintain the seeds of renewal. Tom kicked at the glowing floor. This is insane. You're talking about abandoning billions of people. I'm talking about ensuring the species survives, Marcus shot back. The calculations are clear. Without intervention, we have perhaps 5 years before cascading failures make recovery impossible. The island represents hope. Maya felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on her shoulders. The visions had shown her something Marcus didn't understand. She was the catalyst. Her genetic markers, shaped by generations of island dwellers in her ancestry, made her the key that could complete the transformation. Without her conscious participation, the island would remain trapped between dimensions, slowly dying. But with her help, it would disappear into safety, taking her family with it while leaving the rest of humanity to face the coming darkness alone. There has to be another way, she said desperately. The crystal network, if it extends beyond the island, maybe we could use it to help repair the damage instead of running from it. Dr. Chen looked up from his tablet. Theoretically possible, but the energy requirements would be enormous. You'd need multiple nodes across the globe, all functioning in perfect harmony. The ancient civilization tried something similar, that's why they fell. The network overloaded. Because they were working with primitive technology, Maya realized. But we have better understanding now, better materials. What if we could create a distributed system instead of a centralized one? Marcus shook his head. Too risky. Too many variables. The island sanctuary is guaranteed survival. For a few hundred people, Sarah said, while everyone else dies. She thought of the children playing in the settlement above, their laughter echoing across beaches that might soon exist in another reality entirely. She thought of her sister back home, of friends and colleagues who had no idea what was coming. She thought of billions of people who deserved a chance to fight for their future instead of being abandoned to it. The crystal heart pulsed, waiting for her decision. "Show me," Maya whispered, placing both hands on the surface. "Show me how to make the network work." Energy exploded through her consciousness, and this time she didn't pull away. Information cascaded through her mind, engineering principles beyond current human understanding, power distribution equations that could reshape reality itself, the precise calculations needed to heal instead of hide. It would require sacrifice, it would require risk, and it would require her to trust in humanity's capacity for redemption rather than fleeing from its failures. But it was possible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the island as Elena stood at the edge of the crystal pool, her children beside her. The water's surface rippled with an otherworldly luminescence, responding to their presence like a living thing. After everything they had endured, the deception, the revelations, the terrible choice between worlds, they had finally reached the moment of decision. Marcus emerged from the jungle path, his expensive clothes torn and mud-stained, but his eyes still burning with desperate ambition. Behind him came Dr. Voss and 3 security personnel, the last remnants of his operation. The billionaire's empire was crumbling back in civilization, his crimes exposed, but he'd returned to claim what he believed was rightfully his. "Step away from the pool, Elena," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." Elena turned to face him, feeling the ancient power of the island coursing through her veins. The symbols carved into the stone around the pool glowed brighter, responding to the confrontation. "I understand perfectly. You never intended to help us. This was always about the island's power." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Help you? I gave you everything, shelter, safety, a new life. All I asked for in return was access to something that could change the world." "You asked for our souls," Maya said, stepping forward with newfound confidence. The trials they had faced had transformed her from a frightened teenager into someone who understood her own strength. You wanted to use us as keys to unlock something that was never meant to be possessed. The island itself seemed to pulse with energy as the standoff continued. Trees swayed without wind, and the very air hummed with tension. Dr. Voss activated a device that looked like a cross between a scanner and a weapon, pointing it toward the pool. "The energy readings are off the charts," she reported to Marcus. "If we can harness even a fraction of this power—" Her words were cut short as the ground beneath their feet began to shake. Cracks appeared in the ancient stone, spreading outward from the pool like a spider's web. The island was responding to the threat, awakening defenses that had slumbered for millennia. "You're destroying it!" Elena shouted over the growing rumble. "The island is alive, and you're killing it!" Marcus's security team raised their weapons, but before they could fire, vines erupted from the earth, wrapping around their legs and arms. The jungle itself had joined the battle, protecting the sacred ground from those who would exploit it. Tom grabbed his mother's hand, his young face determined. "Mom, the voices. They're telling me what to do. We have to complete the ritual. It's the only way to save the island and stop him." Elena looked at her son, seeing wisdom far beyond his years in his eyes. The island had chosen them, not as Marcus's pawns, but as its guardians. She nodded, understanding flooding through her. Together, the family stepped into the pool. The water was warm, almost alive, and as it rose around them, the chaotic energy began to stabilize. Ancient words flowed from their lips, words they had never learned but somehow knew. The language of the island itself, passed down through generations of guardians who had protected this sacred place. Marcus broke free from the vines and lunged toward the pool, but an invisible barrier stopped him cold. His face contorted with rage as he realized the power would never be his. "You're making a mistake," he screamed. "I could have used this to heal the world, to solve every problem humanity faces." "You would have used it to control the world," Elena replied, her voice carrying new authority. "The island knows the difference." The ritual reached its crescendo as the pool's light expanded, washing over the entire clearing. Marcus and his people were lifted gently but firmly by an unseen force and carried toward the shore, where his boat waited. The island was expelling them, ensuring they could never return. As the light faded, Elena felt a profound change within herself and her children. They were no longer merely visitors to this place. They were part of it, and it was part of them. The island's knowledge flowed through their minds, showing them their purpose as the new guardians. Maya smiled, understanding her role at last. "We're the bridge," she said softly, "between the old world and the new. We protect the island's secrets until humanity is ready for them." Tom nodded, his connection to the island's consciousness stronger than ever. "And maybe someday, when people have learned to respect power instead of abuse it, we can share what we've learned." Elena gathered her children close as the island settled into peaceful quiet around them. They had lost their old life completely, but they had gained something far more precious, a purpose that would guide them for generations to come. In the distance, Marcus's boat disappeared beyond the horizon, carrying away the last threat to their sanctuary. The island was safe, and so was the future it protected.